physically strong enough to kill Sun Snatcher.
That's right. But first, we have to make our physical bodies strong. Ready, everyone? And 1, and lunge, and 2, and remember, when you sweat, that's just your body flushing poison from your brain. And
Welcome back to the Harbor. I'm your host, the Kino Cowboy. I'm here with my co-host Scott Keith. Today we're doing his pick of Brigsby Bear from 2017, directed by what's his name, Dave McCary, something like that. Yeah,
Dave McCary. It's all SNL people. He worked at SNL. Kyle Mooney, of course, worked at SNL. In a weird way, even though this isn't officially affiliated with SNL, in my opinion, this is the best SNL movie we might have had in years because of that. You know, I'm not saying it's Wayne's World. It's kind of hard to compare it to Wayne's World. Very different movie. But
I was looking this guy up. I was like, what? Okay, he's married to Emma Stone. Okay, what else? Then I looked at the very bottom. Epic rap battles of history. I was like, okay, wow. Amazing.
And you can kind of see that in the production and the sort of, I don't want to say like cheap effects, but in your non-big budget,
purposely lo-fi, and it has a low budget anyway, so it works because of the context.
Oh, it's all about context.
And then Kyle Mooney, he just released that trailer for his debut movie Y2K,
right? Which we did not plan, by the way.
Yeah.
That happens a lot on this podcast. It's weird. You think if, you know, I would almost say it's providence. It's like providence from God, but not from the algorithm, which is the only God that matters on this platform.
Yeah.
It depends. But
speaking of which, today's episode is brought to you by me, because I just released a brand new video essay. It's a hefty one. It's about Disney attraction movies. I watched every single one of them, so go check that out after this if you want, you know, add it to your watch later or whatever. But, you know, I worked pretty hard on it, so that's the official sponsor for this episode. But anyway.
And the second sponsor is I'm going to be in New York on September 13th.
You can see part of the Harbor live in New York.
You can see me live in New York telling dick jokes. If you happen to live in New York and you're around Queens, Grove 34 is the club. I will be there September 13th at 8 p.m. You can see me, some other Arkansas comics, and then also local New York comics. Lineup to be determined, but it's going to be me, Bear, Zach Slomers, JP Ford, Rob Rigo, all these other people.
Anyway, all these people you don't know about.
All these people you don't know about, and they're really funny.
Back to
and
the
also
movie.
One guy who's passed at the Comedy Cellar, whose name I can't remember, and he's the only one like.
Well, I'm sure he has good taste in movies. Anyway,
no, I'm sure.
When you mentioned this to me that to watch this years ago, it was back in the 2010s, I think.
Yeah, it was like 2018 when I first saw it.
And so all I did was Google search it, and all I saw was the image of him holding the bear head in a field. And my first thought just immediately was like, oh, this is one of those mid 2010s quirky indie comedy things, kind of like maybe like Frank or something. Not that Frank's bad. I just didn't really care for Frank, but just a very 2010s kind of twee kind of thing. That's what I was worried it was. And I knew nothing about it, so I went in blind, and I really enjoyed it.
Good. That makes me so happy. Okay.
I was really happy that you put it on the list, because I was like, man, I really like this movie.
Okay, because there's a lot of things in there that are very Adrian core, all the lo-fi VHS stuff.
And it reminded me of a movie that came out this year, completely different, but I saw the TV Glow, similar lo-fi.
Which I need to see. I missed it in theaters just because I was busy.
I looked it up, and he's a producer on that movie, and completely different. This is, you know, dealing with trauma, and the other one is a different kind of trauma / trans coming out kind of thing. But I don't know.
Yeah, this is coming out of a cult bunker. It's a bit
but I would recommend them almost as like a double feature.
Yeah, I need to see. Is it on streaming or on demand?
Yes.
Like I saw the
it
TV Glow. Okay. I will need to see that. I didn't know why, because I was doing my research for this, and some of the, like, when I searched on YouTube Brigsby Bear to look at interviews and stuff with him and Mark Hamill, and we'll get about Mark Hamill's brilliant casting for the themes of this movie in a minute.
The fact that they got him in the middle of the sequels filming and shit is crazy.
Yeah, they did. I didn't even think about that. The timing. Jeez.
Same year as Last Jedi. It's like, how did you do this?
Right. This is the best movie you made in the 2010s. That's probably not. But no, it's the fact that they're able to get them. It's that SNL clout, man. And the fact that they had, Samberg attached. Phil Lord helped produce this.
Yeah.
What I was saying is, when I searched this, I saw the TV Glow was showing up in the algorithm, and I was wondering why, if it was just thematic or not. I didn't know that Kyle Mooney was a producer. And in interviews, very simply, Hamill's like, I like the script, and I think he might have even said, like, I don't even know how much money I made on this, because he's like, I got money, dude. I'm Luke Skywalker. Like, I got residuals for my kids. Like, it's fine. But
yeah.
And having him in this, so this movie, it's about trauma. It's also about fandom and how those two things are intertwined. Yeah. Which, as two, I'll just say it, two mentally ill people who cope by having a movie podcast, I think we can relate to that. And
I'm sure Mark Hamill can fucking relate to that.
Yeah, no shit, dude.
Like, more than anyone in the world.
He's like having to deal with everything.
This is right before the fucking online shit show of The Last Jedi.
Right. And this is so wholesome, which, by the way, is what makes me work. First of all, I'm so glad you went into this blind. And so did I. I don't know how blind I went into it. I might have known. No, I think I didn't go completely blind. So one of the reasons I love this movie, and I loved it on a rewatch just as much, if not more, which I was very happy, because I hadn't seen this since like 2018. So I was afraid I might have recommended a movie that didn't age well or something.
No, you got taste. I'll admit it, I guess.
But yeah, it's better than, I don't know, recommending Kangaroo Jack or something. I kind of want to rewatch that, actually.
Oh man.
But if you read about the making of that, it's fascinating, because it's supposed to be R-rated at first.
That's the shit.
It's fascinating. Anyway,
how you can cut something down that hard it's wild.
Crazy. Because even as a kid, I was like, this is pretty racy for a PG movie. Anthony Anderson's in it. Who's funny. He's a funny actor. Say what you will about the script. I haven't seen this as a kid. Anyway, not Samurai Jack, Kangaroo Jack.
We'll leave that to the nostalgia critic.
No, Samurai Jack's the shit.
Yeah.
But I was worried about it. So I saw this movie the same night I took and I will say this is relevant. My black girlfriend and I went to see 3 Billboards outside Ebbing, Missouri, which is, we walked out of it and it was like a very studio bait, like NPR listener, and I'll listen to NPR on time to time, sort of thing, like a movie about race with no prominent roles for black people that I remember. Like, they're all kind of side characters with a few lines. I mean, Frances McDormand's a fantastic actress and stuff, but it's weird that you have this movie about race and Peter Dinklage has more screen time than any people of color. It's one of those, well-intentioned, but obviously made by like white liberals,
milk toast liberals.
Yeah, is kind of, that's how it felt. We walked out of that we were like literally laughing at parts of the movie, because I remember at one time there's the black guy who's like knocked on Frances McDormand's door and she talked to him. She's like, "Hey, what's your name?" And he's like, "Jerome." And we like laughed in the back of the back row of the theater, because it was just too on the nose with everything else going in the movie, But we came home and this is a palate cleanser. And my girlfriend at the time, she knew nothing about it. She was very happy it wasn't all just in the bunker. We leave the bunker 11 minutes in. That's the incident, really. So it's hard to like sell people on this movie without giving that away. But it was such a good palate cleanser for both of us. And that's part of the context I watched this originally in. It's also, I had like introduced her to Star Wars at that point, which she had never seen, and she like got real into. And then the sequel trilogy started killing off everybody, and she's like, "Why'd you get me attached to these people?" But it's so we watched it. It was a great palate cleanser. It was so wholesome and pure, and like didn't have sort of that Hollywood cynicism that an Oscar bait movie might have. Because this is such a tonal tightrope that this movie walks, because it's about something very dark, but the character is so innocent. And Kyle Mooney plays him so well. So Kyle Mooney is kind of a weird, just if you see him in things, he kind of has that weird vibe. Not no, he started out on YouTube, doing sketches, sketch comedy troupe called Good Neighbor Stuff, or Good Neighbor. That's it. And he's always kind of had this weird vibe. He's on SNL. I don't know if he's like a principal cast or like what his thing is. I'm not a huge SNL guy. But he has the balance just right. It never feels like he's doing a simple jack. It it's not like fully autistic. It's just like he's had no social development growing up. Like he's on neat, but with no access to 4chan, so he's more pure.
Yeah. It's that pinpoint that you just described really makes the whole film. Because when it starts, I'm worried, and he's, a grown man watching a small children's show, and then he has a whole presentation on the lore for his family. I was like, okay, so this is just gonna satirize fandoms and like, and neckbeards that watch children's programming. But no, it takes you way out of that. And because at first, from my perspective, going in blind, I was like, okay, so this is like something that's off about this universe. Because when they go out to talk in the glass dome, I'm like, well, what is this dome thing? And then the bees were animatronics. I'm like, okay, this is an interesting direction for the world they live in. What is this? This is a weird art direction. Oh, and then as soon as they give you just enough of his dad, just that brief shot of his dad wearing the mask going to the car, that makes you start to wonder, well, wait, what's going on? And right as you start to wonder that, that's like the police pull up. Like it gives you just enough, and then they get straight to the point, which was cool.
Right. This movie is it's 100 minutes, which is one of my favorite lengths for a movie. I've said it on here before. It's great. You have that 90-minute briskness, but you can just cram in a few more character moments, a couple more scenes to kind of flesh it out. Just like, I'll give you an example. The scene of when he talks to that chick that they were both rolling on Molly and he almost hooked up with at the party. And he's like, hey, I can't marry you, talking about that.
Yeah.
They're able to kind of close that plot line. And like the movie could have worked without that. Would have been a weaker movie, but like it could have worked without that. But just having a little extra in the runtime to be able to do little things like that. I always appreciate that in movies. Because
he's very much his own character, but there were some very Napoleon Dynamite-esque kind of things he would say or do that I liked, because it was like unintentionally quirky with his dialogue sometimes, because he doesn't know what he's saying.
Right, and it fits within the world. Is why it works. Like even immediately when Greg Kinnear, who's great in this movie, is the detective who's like asking him, and he looks at his shirt and he's like, what's that? And he's like, it's Brigsby. And then underneath it says it's Brigsby on the shirt. Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Or there's a great jump cut. This could be like a Napoleon Dynamite thing where Samberg is like, what's your plan to escape? And he's like, it's pretty complicated. And then just cuts him throwing the TV out the
That
window.
was the biggest laugh I got. That was, I had to write that one down because it was great.
There's a lot of things in this movie, especially on a rewatch, that like, again, it's funny, not all of it's laugh out loud funny. I almost get tired of hearing him talk about Brigsby every scene, but that's the movie. But like,
at first I was worried that it was just going to be a one note thing, like, oh, this is just satirizing a grown man who likes to watch preschool shows and shit. And that was all they were going to have to say before everything escalates. But thankfully, it was not that. It was very surprisingly very touching film. And But it just made me think of our friend Justin. His roommate in college was a kind of a freak and like weirdo Tumblr 4chan kind of guy.
Was he a brony?
Yeah, but like
I know he was a
he
furry.
watched every new episode of Arthur like every day and was like tuning in for it.
That's weird.
Yeah,
And I'm not saying if you want to go back and watch Arthur now and then, you know, I watch, and this is more adult Emmy winning, but like, I just said like a few weeks ago, I watched a few episodes of Samurai Jack just because I saw it on HBO Max, and I was like, okay, let's throw this
well,
on.
yeah, that's a little different
Yeah, and it's also very good animation.
than Arthur, a preschool show.
Yeah, it's they even kind of address how the show grew with James, Kyle
Yeah.
Mooney's character, main character, because one of not Greg Kinnear, but one of the other policemen in the, I forget the actor's name, in the movie, he's like Beck Bennett, who plays Deputy Banner, he's been in a bunch of stuff. He was talking about how like, yeah, I watched some of it, one where they like teach multiplication, and then James is like, oh yeah, that's an older episode for young kids.
Yeah.
I guess when I was young. So they kind of it's weird because they're all didactic, because even as messed up as they are, his parents or his kidnappers wanted the best for him in a weird way. They just knew if they let him out into the world, he would be taken away from them. Which it's the ultimate in helicopter parenting. It's what it is. And how some people, are afraid to expose their kids to certain things.
Yeah.
Even at like I had a friend growing up, we both did, who, for example, they were really concerned about cursing and swearing in movies. And they started watching Halloween, the original, on TV, then went ahead and rented it and watched it. And then later were complaining about how in the non-TV edit there was cursing. And even as a kid, I was like, it's Halloween. It's Mike Myers. What are you, or Michael Myers?
Mike Myers, yeah.
Mike Myers also curses, but in different ways. It's like,
Shagadelic.
yeah, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Things like that. And then also that family like had adult children living with them for a long time, longer than it should be, and not
Much
just
longer.
like, yeah, and not just like a couple months to get back on your feet sort of thing.
Like it goes past even what is normal in Europe.
Yes, no, even a Spanish or Greek family would be like, okay, what's going on? What's going on?
Yeah.
Arabs too, I think.
But it's like such a unique concept because it would be so fascinating if the show was actually real, because there's no show on that level that's only been made for one person and that only one person has been able to see. And specifically the episodes are like focused on teaching him things like related to him and his house and his life. Like they say, oh, don't, like in the first scene, it's like, put this in the yellow thing and not the red thing. And it's like, what the hell?
Put it in the
But
put the empty bottles in the yellow bin. It's like reminding him how to recycle.
it's such a messed up thing though. It's like a true crime aspect of like people that would legitimately blow up if it got uploaded to YouTube because of the novelty of it. So
right.
that part,
and it does in this community.
yeah, that part was realistic to me. And
which
like
it's
the lost media community would be going crazy because it would be hard to get all of it uploaded if it was part of a police, investigation.
yeah, there's definitely, you have to suspend some of your disbelief of like where this is in it's set in Cedar Hills, Utah, which is a suburb, I think, of Provo, Utah, which is of like 100 something thousand people in Provo. And it was shot in Salt Lake. So first of all, that wholesomeness kind of and the Mormonism kind of meld together. I don't know if that's intentional. It was probably just where they shot the movie, but it does strike me as like it could be this nice, wholesome Mormon family who like, really wants the best for their son. Absolutely devastating to think about if your son was kidnapped 25 years ago,
Yeah.
and now they're like 27 or something, 20 or 26, and you know, I mean, what do you do? How do you deal with that? And the parents aren't in the focus, but they're definitely in it enough. Matt Walsh gives, or like one scene in particular where he's really breaking it down. Like, do you know how much this affected us and how hard it was on, did it like really does it well.
Yeah.
This movie has a good cast. Is for being a low budget movie, it's that made most of its money, I think, on streaming. The box office is like 680,000 in this. It's Matt Walsh, Greg Kinnear, Andy Samberg kind of shows up, takes you out of the movie a bit. Mark Hamill, of course. I even think like one of those chicks ended up in Euphoria, so like she ended up blowing up. So I mean, and I'm jumping all around here, but even the performances of like, it's so easy in movies about high school or teenagers to have the kids be bullies. And there's definitely some of that when he like, it alludes to it enough where it's like he tries to talk to some people at a party and is like, hey, I like your shirts. And they just look at him like, who is this old guy talking to us? But it's enough where like he finds his core group of people who are really accepting of him.
I think this is
And
reflective
yes,
of the
it would
2010s.
blow up in Cedar Hills, which the suburb is like 10,000 people. So like, yeah, if you saw him at the hardware store getting fertilizer for a bomb, it turns out, and you had seen him on the internet, you'd be like, holy shit, dude. There was a chick in our hometown, the little who's like 13-year-old Indian girl who was missing for like a couple months. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah,
But
I do.
my mom, she's retired, so she has time, got super into it and was like, doing that. And that was a whole local story. And this is on another level. This isn't some runaway. This is another thing. So it's completely believable in that sense.
And I'm
I will
glad they
suspend my disbelief on some of the, like, Greg Kinnear get some stuff out of evidence and stuff. It's a small town police department, so maybe he could get away with it. But I don't care. It makes the movie work.
I don't know. There's a lot of decisions within the script, like you mentioned, that I'm glad that they did. So there's plenty of things that's like, yeah, I get it. He would have probably been bullied, but I'm glad that's not a focus. It's just like a quick like, these guys are looking at him weird, but no one really likes those guys at that party anyway. I like that detail, and I think you know it's reflective of the 2010s of how the mindset, especially in high school and college, be more accepting and open to
Yeah, it's
people
like
to
21
being.
Jump Street.
Yeah, but like it's true. And
Well, also, wouldn't you like, let's say you're in high school, and imagine we're in high school and we hear about this local story, and then that guy shows up at his party. Wouldn't you want to listen to him and
yeah,
talk
hell
to, like,
yeah.
you?
I'd be friends with a guy
Yeah,
quick. It'd be
yeah, especially
fascinating.
if he's into making movies.
It's just so shitty that they give him MDMA and like he starts to feel weird. Like imagine not even knowing what drugs are and then, and then starting to feel that way.
Yeah, it's
But
you get this. He doesn't even know what Coke is, let alone a beer.
yeah.
I think
And
Coke
then
is an interesting choice of brand. Obviously, it's very much signaling like Greg Kinnear's character knows that this guy is mentally a child and is trying to be like, "Hey, buddy, want a Coke?" sort of thing.
yeah.
Not in any sort of condescending way. It's all very wholesome. I mean, this is an incredibly wholesome movie. And but also this movie's so much about nostalgia and fandom. And Coca-Cola as a brand has weaponized nostalgia. There you go. Has weaponized nostalgia so much.
So hard.
It's amazing. All of their like mid-century sort of stuff when they had less competition. I even
They invented Santa Claus. Like
yeah,
basically.
they basically were like, hey, let's take this kind of niche folklore character based on a real guy and market him. It's funny, I had a student once who was like 10 who talked to me. She was like, Santa Claus, she was like second language, she was Brazilian, and she was like, Santa Claus was invented by the Coca-Cola company. It's like, yep, you're right, Horace. He was. But I can even think of like Inside Llewyn Davis when he's like, drinking a Coke in that mid-century gas station. If you go to the World of Coke in Atlanta, that stuff is like revisionist history where the entire 20th century revolves around Coca-Cola. It's insane. They have photos of it like being introduced in Italy by horse and buggy because they didn't really have cars in Italy yet because it was like World War One or around that time. It was like 1917 or something.
Yeah, but that's the thing is everyone in the world has had fucking Coca-Cola except for this guy.
Like Cuba and North Korea, I think are the only two countries because of embargoes. And I think Cuba might have it now because the embargoes.
Well, I know, but you know, it's like everyone in the world's had this drink except for this guy.
Yeah.
It's so
crazy.
It's crazy. And of course, because of the kind of YouTube content I engage with, my dumb brain was like hoping for his in-depth opinion on it as he's trying it for the first time. You know?
No, he just tries it and is like, huh, I like it.
Yeah,
you know,
like moves on. But you know,
you wanted him to like chug it and being like, this tastes like Brigsby juice or something.
Yeah. What this movie is the only movie where a guy in his mid-20s is almost having sex with a high school student, and it's the high school student who's taking advantage of the grown man.
Yeah, because it's like
crazy.
I wonder,
and it's not like this guy's mentally handicapped kind of thing. It's just different, but it's like it still made me like feel really uncomfortable that she was like pushing for that.
It is uncomfortable. They're both on drugs, but she's at least been on Molly before. And, you know, Molly makes you super horny.
Yeah.
I don't know because I'm on SSRI, so I don't take Molly because it would either fuck me up or not work at all. But it is an odd thing. And you have to wonder, how much does this guy know about sex? I'm sure his captors didn't tell him about it.
Nothing.
They did tell him to not touch his or like only touch his penis 2 times a day or something. That's a joke in one of those movies.
Yeah.
And you know, who knows if Matt Walsh, if his bio parents had like broached that conversation with him yet. They're still trying to get him to understand like basketball and swimming. Just so many things.
Yeah, that was an uncomfortable scene, but I like later on where his sister figures it out and she's like, you do not need to do this. Like,
right.
Yeah, and then it kind of dawns on you. You kind of forget for a minute like how old he actually is because it's just the way he acts. And then when she says that line, it kind of brought like a, oh shit, yeah, he's in his mid-20s. Yeah. I forgot that these are like high school kids.
Right. But it's Utah, so you know, it's okay.
Yeah.
you can have 3 14-year-old wives over there, I think. Ugh.
Also, Mark Hamill. It's like for lower budget features, I would normally kind of joke about how like they get the big star and he's only in the beginning at the end, but here it doesn't feel like some cheap bullshit. It's just it's in line with the movie, and also since he's the voice of all these different characters, he's through the whole thing, so it doesn't feel cheap in that way at all.
Right. And also he's the perfect cast, not just because he knows about fandom, toxic fandom, more than about anybody on the planet except George Lucas, maybe.
Yeah.
It's that he's been pure good, the emblem of pure good with Luke Skywalker, and his second most common role, which people who aren't aware of his voice acting wouldn't know, is the Joker, the symbol of pure chaotic evil. And in this, he is a kind of evil character, almost like a lawful evil character, if we're talking D&D terms. But he has this like wholesome, pure vibe about it and pure intentions, which makes for a great complex villain in that way. But also it's like, yeah, he's played both sides of the moral equation before. So he's able to balance that perfectly, I think. You know, and Mark Hamill's the shit, and you know, he's better used here than he is in like The Machine or something. Or Kreischer's movie.
Also, like that, you know, he's just James is just like me. If I was in this situation, he sees one movie in the theater and he's like, "Oh shit, I gotta do this myself." It's like, wait, other people could do this too. He's like, yeah, I guess.
No, it's a big pivotal moment where it like zooms in or tracks in on him when he's like, "Can anybody make a movie?" You know, and he
yes,
in this. And it's kind of beautiful in this childlike way of just no inhibitions, just immediately starts making storyboards, even though he has no real idea what he's doing. But he just gets a bunch of books and does it. And that's what this movie is. It is critical of fandom and being overly attached, emotionally attached to brands and being a man child in that way. But it's a celebration of making your own things. And you could even argue like the thesis of the movie is one one way to get out of that toxic fandom is to make your own things. Because fandom, if you're just a professional fan, you're a professional consumer, and that's all you are.
Yeah.
And obviously we love movies, and we love Star Wars. We also hate Star Wars, but like any good Star Wars fan. But we at least make our own things. This podcast, your videos, your Disney video, which is very good, by the way. I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed how much you were able to fit into an hour. It's a way to move past that toxic mindset is to like grow up and produce and give back. And also like the advantage of fandom, like fandom is toxic when it's somebody by themselves having a parasocial relationship with something.
Yeah.
Whether that be a franchise or an influencer. Where it's not toxic is when like it brings people together in like your love of Coke, like us joking about loving Coke or like getting some Coke while we play cards,
and we're talking about this, by the way.
We're talking about this. Yeah, it's a hack joke. I'm not talking about I hate that hack joke to be like, oh, cocaine, Coke.
What if Mario's actually doing magic mushrooms?
Yeah,
it's that same kind of thing.
But like, yeah, it's bad for you if you're just sitting alone drinking it all the time. But like, there is a like social glue to it. I guess there's that with beer too, but I prefer Coca-Cola.
I do too. Yeah.
I like beer. You don't like beer at all. You're like beer's mid-ass drink.
It is. If you agree that beer's mid in the chat, write it below. It's just beer. Liquid bread.
It doesn't do I like bread.
I like sweet shit like this.
Yeah. But even things like Smash Bros. Like the reason I love Smash Bros. Isn't because it's an impeccably designed game, which it is. But it's not just that. It's because I've made friendships over that as a common activity. And I've been thinking about this a lot recently because I've really been trying to like push my comedy, and it's been I've definitely in the past few months like have gotten some good opportunities. Going to New York on the 13th, Grow 34. And I've written a lot of material, but I recently played Elden Ring. This seems like a non sequitur, but hang with me. It's a single player game that I spent 137 hours in over a few months. And there's part of me as a 31-year-old man who needs to be looking for jobs. Like, is this healthy? To be doing this. And I don't feel that way with everything, but like it's very story light, lore dense story light. It's like, how much am I actually taking away from this? Is this just unhealthy escapism? Now I can talk about it with other people, theorize about lore with other people and things like that. So it's good in that way. But I do worry about like certain things like this. Escapism has been my big drug my whole life. That's why I have a movie podcast, for fuck's sake. And sometimes I worry about like, when is that unhealthy? I even see it in, like comedians who, because they are who they are, like allergic to being sincere. I think it's not as bad as a problem as it was with like Gen X comedians, which is also just a generational thing. But are you just prolonging your own immaturity in childhood by doing this? But at the end of the day, nothing matters.
Yes,
and being able to distract yourself, nothing inherently matters. You can attribute meaning to things, I shall say. But being able to escape but then come back to your life, hopefully wiser with some sort of knowledge, or just being able to escape, and like that in and of itself is good. I think is good. And I have to remind myself that that's okay. Also, I know if I was, I'm on the internet and there's streaming and movies and all sorts of electronic distractions. During COVID, I also read all of Lord of the Rings in a week. So if I was born in the 60s, I'd be doing the same shit, but in different ways. I still like reading
with
fantasy
books. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
We
I
could
mean,
go in the movies
I'm
probably even
rereading
more.
Dune right now, for fuck's sake, you know.
But this did bring up a lot of thoughts when it comes to fandom and consumption of media. And I and my peers, there's a total problem where you get into this loop. Sometimes it's a depression loop. Sometimes it's just how things are. But you want to watch the same shows you've always watched because they're a comfort to you. And breaking out of that gets hard for a lot of people. And then wanting to take risks on new movies and stuff seems to be getting worse for some people I've noticed. And then it gets into this loop. It's like, well, your favorite movies, you had to watch them at some point. So when are you going to watch something new? And, I watch a lot of new movies. I try to every year not just rewatch stuff, but it's good to rewatch certain things to a point. But when you grow up like me, watching Star Wars nonstop as a kid, and it's like your biggest favorite franchise, you get to a point where you've seen you've seen A New Hope 200, 300 plus times, maybe more, because some kids like me would just put it on and rewatch it multiple times a day sometimes if you got nothing going on. But the whole thing is like, I went and watched Phantom Menace in theaters when it came out with my family because it's a throwback. It's been 25 years. But when I was watching it, and it is weaker when it comes to Star Wars, but I still enjoyed it. But did I get anything out of it? It was fun to see it with my family, but the whole time I was thinking, like I love this franchise, but I don't need to keep watching it all the time. And I haven't really in the last 6, 7, 8 years. In my 20s, when you start to get into more serious media, you kind of let go of certain things. It doesn't mean I don't like Star
Well,
Wars, but it's like I've
not
seen the
everybody likes
Phantom
it.
Menace 150 times. It's you got to watch new stuff too. Like and that seems like an obvious line to draw from point A to point B, but it's true. It's like they're always there. It's like I'm kind of tired of watching Empire Strikes Back. I haven't watched it. I've watched it once in like the last 5 years.
Me too. And I watched it in theaters, and I almost felt like I could have spent that time watching something new in theaters.
Yeah.
It was fun. I'd never seen it in theaters before, but also I'm like, I've seen this movie so much. I even felt that when we rewatched Indiana Jones for this cast. I'm like, I have seen Raiders and Last Crusade too many times. Like, I haven't seen this movie in 10 years, and I can still
That's
quote it on my
interesting. Because for me, Indiana Jones is like I didn't watch it as much. I watched it a lot, but like not as much. And
I watched
so
it a lot.
I don't want to watch it anytime soon now because we did it for the show
Sure.
last year. But Raiders and Temple of Doom I can watch. And if someone says you want to watch these, I'm gonna be like, yeah, because um probably seen Last Crusade too much. But yeah, it's just like you can still hold on to these things that you love growing up. It's like I'm 30 now. It's time to watch new things.
Right. Or just
And
experience new things,
yeah.
and have a real life. Because I think I legitimately think there are people in this world, adult men, who get their ideas about human relationships from anime. And it's
Yeah.
weird. It's wrong. Their views on
Or
women,
God forbid porn.
or God forbid porn, or even just like romantic comedies. I've talked about
Yeah.
this with women I've dated, of like how Hollywood hypes up the infatuation stage so much that it kind of portrays this unrealistic view of love. A more realistic view of love would be like the parents in this movie, Matt Walsh and what's the actress's name? Matt Walsh and Michaela Watkins, where
Oh,
it's
you say
like,
Matt Walsh because unfortunately I know a different Matt Walsh on the internet that's famous that's like a
oh,
piece
is
of
he
shit.
who is he, like an alt-right guy or something?
Yeah, he's like an extreme alt-right political activist
Yeah, no,
guy.
I've heard about him because the first time I heard about him, I was like, I wonder if the actor Matt Walsh knows about this.
Because like I would hate to be associated with that guy. Fuck.
No, it's
But
but like but my point is like a lot of life is mundane, and we go to the movies to like, be moved. To I always kind of view art as just like life distilled and like concentrated. You have a lot of these emotions. I mean, yes, obviously you have big emotional moments in life, but you're able to get that catharsis. There's these weird empathy machines in a way, which can be used as. I always feel odd with the criticism of things being emotionally manipulative. They're like, that movie was emotionally manipulative. I'm like, isn't that why you go to movies? It's like when people call Spielberg gets a lot, and I'm kind of like, I know what you're saying, and there's an emotional manipulation, and like, you know, oh, it's a commercial, and it's like an antidepressant drug because we can advertise prescriptive drugs in this country for some reason. And it's like, oh, somebody's depressed, but then they take this and they're like running through the meadow with a golden lap. It's like, to me, that's emotional manipulation. There's no real reflection on the human condition. And I don't feel like I become a more empathetic person by watching that. And hey, some people don't need escapism. They don't need movies. Most people I watch view movies as like an occasional thing, or let's go to the movies once or twice a year on a date night and get popcorn and stuff, versus, let's have it as a central focal point of my life. And I'm friends with those people.
But also there's the people that's like, they only want to engage with the movie so much where they're the kind of people that they watch it and then they don't even discuss it afterwards. It's like, well,
why did we go to this movie together?
Yeah.
Like, why didn't we just watch this separately if we're not going to discuss it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's nice to be around each other and to have that communal feeling in the theater, but
it's like bizarre.
Which is, but anyway, the point is, I kind of hate the movie because I think it bastardizes the book a little. But Into the Wild, hate's a strong word. It's but a lot of people in high school got the wrong idea about that movie. They like romanticize Into the Wild because I think the movie kind of does that in a Hollywood way. When if you read the book and if you read about the guy, it's like Chris McCandless was kind of a fucking idiot going out in Alaska, just like, I'm gonna rough it like Thoreau. It's like, okay, Thoreau was in like the American Northeast and near towns and shit. Like he would have his mom do his laundry, literally. He was like on his friend's property. It's not the same as going out and like trying to hunt moose. Idiot. But it's like happiness is only real when shared, and I think that's what it comes down to. Because like there is a beautiful thing, and like I can meet a random person and talk about Star Wars or whatever. It's kind of it's funny. My last job, which was a corporate job, I would go on these corporate events, and I would talk to people, and sports was always a go-to. And I don't talk about sports, but like that's part of the social utility of sports. Like I always think investing in a team because they're from the same geographic area as you is stupid, because like, I don't know, our college team, they could have recruited people from all over. We don't even have an NFL team here in Arkansas. But also it's more sad because the Arkansas Razorbacks is objectively a mediocre football franchise. And so attaching yourself to that, we're in the SEC too, which is very competitive apparently. But it's like, as silly as I think that is, because I'm always like, it's like, well, we didn't win. The players on the Razorback team won. We sat our butts at home and ate hot wings, which I would rather do that anyway. That's why I'm not a football player with CTE.
That's why.
Yeah, and also because I'm not athletic at all. But there's social utility in having that, and having that escapism, something to talk about.
Totally.
It's human. We're storytelling animals. We've always done it since the caves.
I don't like the childlike perspective that he brings out certain stuff and characters. Like he asks the detective why he doesn't act anymore, and then the detective, it's like, yeah, shit, why don't I act anymore? And then I like the detail that he's quoting his own lines at the end in the theater.
Yeah, so good. His cop partner looks at him and laughs. No, he like wants a second tape. I do think that is the thing, because I think American society in particular, we're overly pragmatic, and like, I don't know, and maybe this is just me projecting, but like there are people, not as many as it's sometimes pursued, of like, put your toys away. Like you need to make money, you need to have a real career. But like it is legitimate if you're really trying it to, say be a local filmmaker or a local comedian, even if you're not making, especially if you're me, even if you're not making tons of money. Unless you're not trying, then get off stage. You're taking my stage
Yeah,
time.
it's just unfair that the whole world treats it like a bullshit hobby until you unless you've released a movie in theaters that people all like and isn't weird and is a good movie that appeals to anyone, then people think it's like some bullshit. Like, don't you want these things in life to exist? Don't you enjoy books and movies and songs?
It's a weird thing. I dated a girl. I'm talking a lot about my exes in the podcast. I dated a girl, not the cool ex. The other exes I've mentioned are cool. I may or may not have broken some hearts there, but like she was very obsessed with the idea of being adult. This is in my mid-20s, and it's because of her parental trauma, frankly. And it's like she was obsessed with like adult job. Don't get stuck in the service industry. Um, she even said one time, like, people in New York, it's like, yeah, New York, you don't have to grow up. I'm like, what are you talking about? You could argue that about the suburbs easily. But she also loved watching SNL every week when Alec Baldwin was doing his Trump impressions, which is the worst era of SNL in my lifetime, maybe. But I was like, don't you realize like these people had a path to here that like you would have shat on because they would have been taken like quote unquote menial jobs while pursuing classes, improv classes at UCB or what have you. It's this weird thing where like people don't see the steps there. Maybe a bit more now that we have the internet and you can see people's career progression. But it's an odd thing. Even like I've worked with comedians who have been like on Comedy Central and stuff, and they're not famous, but it's like we're working at the same venue together. And I mean, obviously they're headlining or whatever, and I'm opening, but it's this weird thing where it's like, yeah, you need this like corporate approval for it to be, real. Not that I'm saying anything bad about Viacom or Comedy Central. I think they're great corporations and I love them. Obviously.
Imagine I started wearing a shirt that just had the Viacom logo on it.
Yeah, I just start wearing that on stage, trying to get
only like the biggest conglomerates. Like, do I wear apparel of? Dude, that'd be funny. But yeah,
thanks. Tim Heidecker shows up in this movie.
Yeah, that was a good surprise because it felt almost like, because of the purposely low quality, felt like an episode of Decker, which was nice because I'm a big Greg head and big Tim Heidecker head. Shout out on cinema. But yeah, Heidecker will show up in projects that he totally gets on like a very specific level. Like he helped with The People's Joker, and so when you see him and stuff like that, and it's like, yeah, this guy gets it, and he remains his like indie street cred with stuff like that.
Oh yeah, and the comedy, which is
not as
good.
Really, who we haven't talked about, who I really liked, was the Spencer. That guy who just is immediately pleasant to him at the party.
Yeah, because he's Kino.
Yeah, and
he has the Thing poster on his wall.
He's kind of like tries to present himself as this cool guy, and then when James wakes up after the party, he's like
playing on After Effects.
Here's me. Yeah, here's all the movie posters I like. But yeah, I really liked his character. Also, when he first talks at the party, it kind of made me think of how quickly kind of language changes, because it was very mid 2010s, like saying smash and like lit and stuff like that. It's like those are already kind of out of favor.
Super dope as shit. That was played for laughs. He's calling everything dope as shit.
Yeah, that was good, because especially like when a little kid picks up on some specific phrase and you're like, where'd you hear that from? It's the same thing. But yeah, I'm glad that it's smart that everyone like treats him pretty well, except, and I was worried they were going to have his sister be like the stereotype, like you're like so weird, but like they have this very beautiful understanding when she starts to help with the
Oh,
movie after
right.
her
And that
grudgingly
again,
going
that's
out.
what brings them together, is like
Yeah.
doing something together.
Yeah.
And she like puts the eye back on. That scene in particular is the turn. And
Yeah.
you can tell from the very first scene where she doesn't have lines, where it's the parents reuniting, hugging him, and he's like, "What's going on?" Is she has that look. And to be fair, imagine you're that child. You're like a makeup child. It's like the first child was a mistake.
Oh yeah.
It
Jesus.
was like they messed up the first pie and had to put another in the oven. And I've read things about that, of like people who have had siblings with special needs or something, and how it does, take away from them, and they hate that they feel resentful, but like part of them feels resentful, because their
Yeah.
parents have to give so much more, not so much more love and attention, but so much more attention to the other kid.
I had two siblings, but I was an only child for 8 years. And then
Yeah.
I remember that eighth Christmas, and suddenly, for some reason, Santa Claus didn't bring me as much that year. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Wonder why that was.
Yeah, your sister sucks.
Guess we'll never know.
Yeah, Santa, if
No,
you're watching right now, write a comment.
I just
Explain.
imagine like being an only child for 17 years and then your long lost brothers found like that'd be so
And then
crazy.
he's older than you.
Yeah. Way older, but you still have to hang out with him like he's a kid, like he's your younger brother.
Right. It's pretty ballsy of the parents to be like, yeah, take him to the football game.
Yeah.
And
That's
then
the
you have,
same logic as Hereditary bringing his like 13-year-old sister to the party. Like, why would you do this, you fucking idiot?
because you're a stupid teenager,
Yeah.
And that, like, he's the only one who can drink, which gets him in trouble, or it could. It does later in the movie, which I guess they probably have him out on bail and give him a slap on the wrist. I mean, he gets put in inpatient in a while, which
Yeah.
um
Well, that was like a major thing. I was wondering the whole movie is like, well, who are these two girls in this show? How did they get involved? And so when he finally finds her, meets up with her, of course it makes sense that it was just one woman or one girl, and not like a double. But that was an interesting scene because like he understands that it's a role, but then he still can't help but slip into it.
because he has a parasocial relationship with them.
Yeah.
Like all these things. That's why I was never huge into Comic Con, just because it all seemed to be about spending money. The art is probably the coolest thing. Seeing the artists and all their, works and stuff, and like seeing what different art styles people have. I always like looking at that stuff. It mostly seems to be about buying merch, which I'm not a huge merch guy. I don't need a bunch of like proof of my fandoms for my
Yeah.
identity.
I'm the same way. Yeah.
Um,
There's a couple Godzilla posters I like. I'll
yeah.
wear graphic tees because I'm a fucking lame ass.
Yeah,
Who
but
doesn't
that's
know how
also
to.
that's something you could get for relatively cheap at Target or whatever.
Yeah, and I don't know how to dress myself,
Yeah,
so
me neither. I bought a Nintendo 64 shirt for $12 the other day because I was like, well, I'll get this. And I've worn it outside once to go to the store. That's it.
Yeah.
I'm not going on stage and be like, I'm a nerd, guys. But there's this weird thing that makes me uncomfortable. And it makes people a lot of money, so God bless them, of like having some actor from the 80s in a TV show and they're like giving away autographs for 40-50 bucks, and you're commodifying yourself and your own identity, and not even the character's identity, your own identity.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing. I mean,
Kinda.
it's a you're it's even the kid who's like in the memes, like, Master Skywalker, they're surrounding us. What are we going to do? And then Anakin kills that youngling, like he's been at cons.
Yeah. Fuck it.
Or
If I was that kid, I'd be doing that too, though.
yeah, I would too, and I wouldn't be above it. But
So gross to
that
me,
one's
though.
more funny than anything. Because what else is that kid famous from? But even like horror cons where it's like, yeah, you were the third kill in Friday the 13th part 7. You were that guy, And it's like, and that's the one place where people are like fans of them and they can make money. It's an odd thing, but also it's good because or the soup Nazi from Seinfeld, that actor who I don't know his name, I just know he's the soup Nazi. He
Exactly.
was he was talking about like Cameo has been great for him, you know, because he gets to do the no soup for you to people for their
Oh my
birthdays.
God.
And he was talking about like, yeah, he would make residuals from that, but he would still have to pick up like restaurant jobs and stuff. You know, it's not like he's not the guy who played Jerry on Seinfeld. That's a Gary Goldman joke, you know. So it's an odd thing. Like, when is fandom toxic and when is it beneficial? And it brings
Yeah,
people.
because then you get the people, and it's bizarre that we have to deal with this, but you get the people that will see you in real life and you played a villain and they'll treat you like shit because for some reason they can't separate the fact that you're a real person. And it's so weird, but also very fascinating to me
The
that
guy who played Rictus Erectus in Furiosa,
yeah.
um, who's one of Immortan Joe's sons, had to go on Twitter and be like, "Hey guys, my character is a pedophile. I'm not."
It's insane that we have to do this. Why?
It's like, hey,
Fucking bizarre.
Ray Fiennes is not Voldemort or a Nazi commandant. I don't know if you know.
Yeah,
Willem
and like,
Dafoe is not Jesus, but he might as well be to me.
you know, but yeah, it's like he slips at the end and he's like, I've been in love with you my whole life, by the way. And it's like, thankfully she treats him nice and isn't like weirded out because obviously it was a shock to her. I was wondering the whole time, like, how was she in on it? No, it just makes sense. Like, that's such a good excuse that it was for a Canadian public access, is what she was told. So she's not going to go looking for it, really.
Mm-hmm.
But like, what a bad place to be in, where the only human girl you know, other than your fake mom for 25 years, was this girl on a TV show that was not even real. Like, so it's such a unique circumstance.
Right. This is a great example of like a low budget, high concept movie.
Yeah.
It's
Same for I saw the TV glow.
yeah, and the amount of that they're able to do with this is it's impressive.
And the way, like, the way he had so much lore built out on the, like, for his
Well,
family.
and that's one of the interesting things is like, because the mother is like a math professor, and the
Yeah.
father clearly has an interest in math and science as well because he's into animatronics and stuff. And he made that Terry the Tiger, which is like a Tickle Me Elmo thing. That's how he got
Yeah.
money. Um, and it's I lost my train of thought. I'm so
That's
mad.
okay. That's
Um,
like,
but no. That what I was saying is like there's genuinely good, if not kooky, world building in that because people start actually like being like, oh, this show's actually really creative because it's outsider art, and outsider art I always find interesting. It's what we make basically. And outsider art, what it does, I remember it was a very interesting. Is at the Atlanta Museum of Art, whatever big art museums in Atlanta. It was years ago. They had like a special temporary exhibit on outsider art, and it was all about how outsider art affects like insider art or whatever you want to call it. You know how you know people will take indie films or indie art and like incorporate it into their more professional productions, and like so even in that way that's important. I guess a comedy example would be like how a lot of alt comedians kind of made comedy after the comedy boom of the 80s when like hacks were able to get careers on the road, so many clubs were exploding and being built. It's like a lot of alt comics made it more personal, and some of them like Patton Oswalt and Janine Garofalo like really made careers out of it, but also like that ended up making comedy more personal and less hacky, frankly, or like cheesy.
yeah. I like how complicated it is in a way. It's like, it's all he knows. So it makes sense that he's still focusing on it. It's crazy though that the detective didn't even think it through before he starts bringing him props like the actual head and stuff because he wants to make the movie or whatever. It's like, yeah, given the context of how the stuff was used, that's pretty insane that you would bring this to him. But of course, he latches on and he can't let it go, even knowing it's a good detail that he's not like upset or floored that he realizes that it was made by his fake dad. He's like impressed by it. He's like, oh my God, he made this whole thing. He's enthralled. And then it becomes like a complication of, well, like, should we allow him to keep latching on to this? But then it becomes this beautiful thing of like using filmmaking to try and heal from this with like, I've made movies out of a form of therapy, and he does too.
Yeah, that's what it is. That's the Fablemans. That's what
Yeah.
that's all about.
Yeah.
E.T.
It's his
exists.
Fablemans. Yeah.
E.T. exists because his family, Spielberg's family, got divorced because of a weird cheating thing. Not that weird, actually. And like he made up an imaginary friend to cope with it. And then years later, he made a movie out of it and made $1 billion in a great ride at Universal.
And it's like, there's this great subversion at the end where he finally goes to visit Mark Hamill, and you're kind of thinking, well, he's going to ask him why he did all this. Why did he go to the trouble to make Brigsby Bear and construct this fake scenario and stuff? You know, like I get that they want an excuse of why he can't leave the house, but like the whole Brigsby Bear thing, you're kind of like wondering kind of the psychology behind the fake dad of why he created it. And instead, Mark Hamill, he starts to go into it, and then the James is like, no, 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 that's not what I'm wondering. I want you to reprise your role for this movie. It's so good, but it's like makes sense that the way they've written that character, it totally makes sense that that's something he would do.
Because he doesn't know how else to process his emotions.
Yeah.
Because he even says when he's showing the storyboards to Spence, he's like, yeah, Brigsby gets his parents taken away and he goes out into this new world. Like it's a 1-to-1 analog for what's happening in his own life. And he has to like defeat his own inner demons. It's very on the nose, but
it's beautiful because while he's willing these things into existence, because in order to shoot this story about going out into the real world, you have to go out into the real world and shoot it with your friends. So it's all he's manifesting his own destiny in a way, and it's very beautiful. And I think it solidified it very much to me. The end, it wasn't him giving some big speech to the screening of the movie. It was the exact opposite. He is having trouble even going in there to watch it because obviously he's processing so much trauma all at once now that it's coming to a head. And it's incredibly beautiful that he kind of just hangs out in the lobby the whole time. And then instead of going for that, like, thanks for everyone, for
Kevin
coming.
Smith, an evening with Kevin Smith.
Yeah, exactly. And I was shocked at the emotional punch it gives you when you see the visual of Brigsby Bear giving him closure and like saying goodbye, and then he disappears. I was floored that like actually made me emotional and hit you in the fucking chest.
Dude, I like teared up at part of this movie. Like it just because I was never in a bunker, but like I can relate to the character so much just as an escapist.
Yeah. And that he's finally able to process this trauma. It's really beautiful.
Also, everybody has escapism.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people, it's shopping or it's sports or it's their own job. There are people who hate their home life so much because they have a loveless marriage and annoying kids that they would rather work late hours than go home. I mean, that happens. Hopefully not too common.
Maybe he becomes a salaryman after this.
Yeah. It does leave it open to like what happens after this. I would like to think he keeps making stuff. Probably doesn't have that normal of a life.
Hopefully that's the thing, is that the next movie he makes is completely original and it's fresh because he's let go of Brigsby Bear. Right. So now he can do new things.
Yeah, maybe he makes his living, because they said he got free money from the internet, so I assume it was crowdfunded. There's a line about that when he's talking to his dad about it, or his captor, Mark Hamill. So maybe he just becomes one of these like, like a red letter media or something.
Yeah,
James Rolfe sort of guys. I've I have a few recommended reading things I want to
Okay.
tag on to the end of this. If you're interested in escapism, something I return to. I'm not a big NPR guy because I made fun of it earlier when we were talking about Three
There's
Billboards.
nothing wrong with NPR, but it's a
No,
very certain kind of
there's a
audience.
kind of person who listens to too much NPR. You know, it's that. It's This American Life 470. It's Show Me the Way. Um, and it's about a kid who runs away to go see Piers Anthony, who wrote the Xanth series of fantasy novels. Um, and it's there's a line in it that sticks out to me. I mean, the entire thing's a great read, but they interview Piers Anthony, and he talks about like his life, crappy home life as a kid. He was in study hall reading a fantasy magazine. Some teacher like snatched it and ripped it up in front of him. And he talks about like there are people who sneer at escapism. Some of us need it. Which sometimes I think people don't get that. People who are like well adjusted and feel happy in jobs I would hate myself in, they just don't get it. That like some of us need a degree of that, and it's a normal thing. And we've used fantasy to make sense of the world since Gilgamesh.
Yeah.
Um, also, there's a C.S. Lewis quote. Corinthians 13:11 is the when I was a child, I spoke as a child, understood as a child, thought as a child, but when I became a man, I put away childish things. Christian apologist C.S. Lewis said, when I became a man, I put away childish things, including the fear of childishness and the desire to be very grown up.
Hell yeah.
Because I think that all comes from like insecurity of like people are like, I need to be grown up. I can't be caught watching these things.
It also, yeah, comes back
Dude,
to our horrible fucking culture of toxic men and toxic masculinity.
like an Andrew Tate sort of thing. Oh no, I was thinking that ex, and she didn't even hate Adventure Time, but that crappy ex I had who was obsessed with like being adult because her mom was bad to
What
her.
a sad way to live.
She was and she projected a bunch of stuff on me because she was insecure about it herself. But like she would watch Parenthood, which to me was like this very schmaltzy sort of TV series, not bad. And like she kind of make fun of me when I would watch Adventure Time or be like, well, it's not as good or it's not as real because it's animated. And I was like, dude, Adventure Time has so much more depth and nuance to say about the human condition than this show you're watching. That's like a kind of generic NBC thing. Not bad, but like I don't love it. Something like that. I'm like, it's there's so much, it's
The most
out.
beautiful portrayal of reincarnation is in Adventure Time that I've ever seen. So,
Yeah.
one of the most high concept TV shows of all time. It's animated and was on Cartoon Network. So,
I still think about and like bring the wisdom with me of like one of my favorite moments in any TV show is when basically a cosmic deity at the end of one arc like offers Finn to like elevate and evolve and like explore the universe with him, and he's like leave the pain of humanity and Earth behind. He's like, no, I put a lot of work into this planet. I'm gonna stick it out. He just says it like that, and I think that's a beautiful thing of like,
hell yeah.
oh, I'll go out there and say like when you're asking like why live, why not kill yourself, and you get dark because I actually use Adventure Time to cope with the breakup of that relationship. Is like I put a lot of effort to this. There's good things to do. I'm gonna stick around, see it out.
Hell yeah.
Brigsby Bear, it's the shit. I think it's one of my favorite movies now. Maybe like top 50, not.
It's a great movie. I'm glad we watched it.
I'm really glad you liked it.
And I mentioned this several times in the episode already, but another you gave an idea of follow-up material. I'll say it again. If you like this movie, you'll like I Watched the TV Glow. That one's a little more challenging in some ways, but if you're not a transphobe, check it out because it's the shit. Really like that movie. I almost wanted to do an episode on it, but I wouldn't. We'd have to bring a trans individual on.
And then it would be odd to be like, hey, can you come on for this
That's
one
always
episode?
the issue. It's like, well, I don't want to talk about this unless I have a trans person on. But then it's like, oh, you only brought me on to talk about a trans movie. It's like, well,
Yeah,
what do we want? I don't
it's
know.
like a weird token. You don't want people to be tokens, which they're not.
No,
But
they just have the perspective I'd love to hear about, like,
yeah, legitimately.
but anyway, no, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm not sure. I forgot what next week is. I'm gonna have to double check. But stay tuned for next week if you want follow-up material. I have that Disney attractions video out. We have a tie-in film. I have a book for sale if you want to support us. That's how you can support us with a book. Eventually, I would like to make a Patreon, but we're not there yet. But so in the meantime, buy our book. Watch Scott in New York City.
Yeah, dude. September 13th at a real club. It's no I mean, not the comedy cellar, but like Grove 34. It's like the pros go there.
You're saying Rule 34.
No, not Rule 34. You can make Rule 34 of me if you want. I would be flattered.
Do not make Harbor Rule 34, please.
Make AI deepfake porn of Adrian and I.
Do not do that. Anyway,
follow me at Scott K Comedy.
Yeah, we'll see you next week.